Hello, I'm Anthony. Arturia have just released their latest FX plugin, the Tape J-37. This is an emulation of the 4-track tape machine released by Studer in 1964 and most famously installed in Abbey Road Studios in London. Two of these machines were used in the recording of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band a couple of years earlier when Abbey Road only had one of them. One of its first ever recording duties was recording John Lennon's Help. So this thing has a very storied history. Many of the Pink Floyd albums were recorded on J-37s as well. Typically, you use tape plugins to add warmth and colour to your recordings. The demo that I'm going to give you today has one on the master bus. You can see it down here. Here's my little insert effect. But it's perfectly reasonable to apply them to individual tracks if you want to add a little bit of extra warmth to one individual thing, maybe your vocals or your guitar track. It is worth saying, however, that this is a subtle effect. We're going to have to listen very carefully to hear these changes today. I'm actually going to show you some visual comparison between dry and wet as well, just to help your ears to kind of attune to what you're supposed to be listening to. But ultimately, its whole purpose is to glue everything together and make everything just sound warm and lovely. The word warm is totally reasonable to use in the case of the J-37 because I believe it had 52 valves or tubes in one of these beasts. That's a lot of analog circuitry that's adding colour to our sound. So without further ado, let's get underway. Here's our main interface. I'm going to have animation turned on today because it's lovely, but you don't need it to be turned on. If you're having CPU issues, you can disable that. At the bottom of the console, we have 4 separate emulations going from the clearest to the most saturated. Starting on the left-hand side, we have a couple of emulations of SM911 tape, which is going to provide greater clarity than the SM468 that we're using in our second 2 emulations. So these 2 buttons that I'm hovering over here are both new tape. They're going to provide the greatest level of fidelity. Moving further along, we switch to some aged tape. So this is going to start losing some of that fidelity. The tape gets worn, which is going to introduce wow and flutter, which is effectively imperfections in the tape. As it gets older, it stretches slightly. That's going to change your playback characteristics, and it's also going to start losing some of its high ends. Then we have an overall modern button, which actually disengages part of the characteristics of the tape machine. As you can see, it's going to remove some of the filters that you would naturally find in the tape machine. That's going to provide an additional bit of clarity if you want a more modern sound. That's about as much talking as I can do without actually listening to the thing. So let's get this song running in the background. And as I say, I'm going to play it quite hot. I'll play the track quite loud and I'll just turn it down if I need to talk over it. So it's on at the moment.
Still whispers in the morning, feels so cold. This is where sadness goes. This is what wild men know.
So what you're really listening for there, and I'll keep stopping it and kind of talking about what we're listening for. When it's engaged, you're going to hear less punch. Any of the sharp sounds, I'll find an example in a moment where we have some quite sharp sounds in the synth and the guitar lines that are really kind of popping through. Those are going to be softened by the tape effect, not necessarily dulled, just warmed and softened. You're also generally going to have a sense of greater depth. Most of the low frequencies just get very subtly accentuated with a tape machine. I'm going to jump to a warmer level of saturation now, and I've positioned the song marker on a point where we're going to get some of those spiky sounds that I was talking about. So you're going to hear synth and guitar sounds really popping through. What I'm going to do first is actually bypass the thing so you can really hear those punching, and I've set it about as loud as I can without it spiking. I'll then bring the tape in and you'll hear all of those transients, all of those sharp sounds just getting controlled. really pleasant to my ears. The tape is just really solving a problem that it's actually very difficult to get something to not hide your high fidelity. I don't want it to be overly compressed. I want it to be a punchy sound, but I don't want it to be quite that aggressive. And the tape emulation is just doing a really nice job. I'm going to give you a visual representation of that now. We'll jump back to the same point in the song. What I've done is I've rendered the entire song with and without the tape effect, and we're going to be able to visually compare the effect that it's having. So we're going to start off listening to the wet channel, and in the comparison channel here in Cubase, we can compare. The only difference between these two outputs is the blue or wet channel has the tape emulation applied. I've also been very careful. Can you see these two copies of Insight on both sides? I've meticulously volume matched these two plugins so that the J-37 itself is having no volume impact on the sound. So wherever you can see a little orange halo popping up behind the blue, that's the dry channel being louder or being more present. If I can flip them so that we can see the dry channel predominant, and then any blue halo that you see is where the tape plugin is poking through the mix more than the dry channel. So hopefully you can hear quite clearly that the dry channel is quite significantly harsher or brighter than the version with the tape emulation, but the tape emulation isn't dulling or muddying the sound, it's simply controlling it. I've just muted the sound now so that I can talk about another couple of attributes of this visual comparison. Let's look at them before I show you why you're seeing what you're seeing. Can you see an enhanced orange halo around 200 to 500 hertz in this area? These little bits of orange poking out are where the dry signal is louder. Bring it back to the beginning again so that we're watching the same stuff. Now if I jump over to looking predominantly at the dry channel, you can see in the upper frequency quite a bit of blue halo from around about 5K up. Can you see all of this little bit of blue here? And finally in the low frequencies, a similar kind of thing. In the UK we would call that the ready brek glow. So I've got that little bit of kind of blue halo at the upper and lower frequencies. Let's have a look at where all that's coming from. If we enter the advanced screen, we get some enhanced options, and we have a very gentle EQ curve here, which is just helping to manifest some of those features you just saw in the visual comparison. One of the things that I really like to do when I'm using a tape emulation is have a tiny amount of boost, and I am talking, well, 2.5 dB focused on 10 kilohertz. So everything from 5K onwards is being very, very gently boosted. This was a tip I came across when I was watching an interview with Alan Parsons. He's talking basically every time you put something on tape, you're naturally going to lose a little bit of upper frequency. It's just an inherent characteristic of recording to tape. And so what they used to do, and he was talking about recording sessions for Dark Side of the Moon at the time during this interview, and he said he used to apply a very tiny upper frequency boost, an EQ boost, every time they would do a tape transfer. If they did the tape bounce, they would put a little bit of EQ bump in just to help compensate for the fact that naturally you are going to lose a tiny bit of upper frequencies. So I pretty much put that in every time I use a tape plugin, just the tiniest of gentle. I mean, 2.5 dB is actually quite extreme. I might even have it a little bit lower than that. But it's going to help maintain that presence that otherwise over the course of multiple recordings you might start to lose. Then a very, very tiny attenuation, 0.7 dB, just to help focus the overall warmth boost that you're going to get. I'm going to pull a little bit of the 200 to 400 hertz, which we generally refer to as mud. Those are the less desirable frequencies. Very tiny attenuation there. And then a similarly tiny boost on the lows just to help add a little bit of extra beef. So all of that is very gentle. You saw it manifested in the frequency curve, and it's just helping the tape machine to do its natural job that tiny bit better. Let's have a look at the drive control next. This is basically a saturation knob. So we'll get the song going. Let's add some distortion. Obviously way too much. But it is really helping to saturate that instrumental sound. It's just gritting everything up. Option 3 has that word in its title. A little bit of distortion we call saturation, and it's warm and sounds great. Too much of it and it's smacking you in the face. So it's just a case of being subtle with the drive control. This can also be used in conjunction with the speed controls. I've got it running at 15 inches per second at the moment, which means the maximum amount of tape is passing over the magnetic heads. We're getting the highest level of fidelity. If I slow the tape speed down by half, then I'm getting half the fidelity. What you're immediately going to notice is a drop away of your high frequencies.
Can't help but wonder who I am anymore, playing your foolish games, twisting the knife, exposing our flaws, salt in the cracks of these long rusts.
And then we have a bit of it's a special effect, this thing. You're not going to use it very often, but you can actually stop the tape machine in mid-flow. This one doesn't need very much explanation when you hear it. Let's have a go.
Just as before, falling.
We've got two different ways that we can bring the tape machine back to life when we re-engage the play button. And we access those from this little selector where it says bar. If you click that arrow down, then you get the option to engage instant mode, which we've just heard, or fast forward, which literally accelerates the tape to get back to the point where it's kind of running to catch up. Let's have a go with that one.
Falling down
A bit of fun. That's not something you're ordinarily going to do. You'd probably get sacked if you did that in the studio in the middle of a take. But all of these buttons really do exist on the J-37. They look exactly like that. And creative musicians and engineers at the time would press the stop button in the middle of a recording and the tape would slow down and then catch back up again. You can also control how long it takes to slow down to a stop. As you can see, I've got it set to 1 bar at the moment. A couple of other things to have a quick look at. Let's have a look at the calibration settings next. You can engage inherent instability and noise in the tape machine. If I turn the noise module on, it's white noise. I understand that tape machines had noise and also instability. This is where you can control wow and flutter. This is a feature of analog emulations that I personally tend to shy away from. I like the thing to do its thing, to have all 52 tubes glowing and adding warmth to the sound. I don't necessarily want to introduce age to the process, but of course the option's there for you. That's entirely up to you. Finally, we have an inbuilt delay, very quick sample of that.
feeling like a memory of home.
It's a very nice natural sounding delay actually. Obviously you wouldn't apply that to your master mix, or I can't imagine a situation where I would, but I can certainly imagine putting it on an acoustic guitar track or a vocal for instance, just to add an extra little bit of depth to that channel. And that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll see you again. Thanks very much.